Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. I'm Cherie Burton. This is a podcast for those who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. Today's episode features Dr. Lotte Valentin. She's a naturopathic medical doctor who also is a medical intuitive and medium, also very focused on ancestral healing. So you're going to hear about her two near-death experiences. It's not often you hear of someone who's had two. She was able to, through these experiences, open up to hear her higher self, the divine, the spirit realm, and really get in and help others access where these epigenetic or ancestral patterns are living in their bodies and how this, especially fear, epigenetic fear, shows up in us. We're going to dive into the Divine Web of Interconnectivity and how we naturally sync to life. But one of the fascinating things about her story is that she actually started medical school at age 54. And so she has this whole message around when you're in midlife, you're actually just getting started. We've bought into all these cultural ideas that your life needs to look a certain way when you hit 50 and beyond. And she's really defied all of those norms. And remember to check out the new wisdom kit that I've offered on my website, CherieBurton.com or StandSpeakShine.com, where you can access this wisdom kit that helps you get into your inner healer. I had that in mind as I put these pieces together that actually all work in unison and synchronicity to awaken your senses and get you into an inner place of stillness. I really love my new goddess cards. So check out that wisdom kit. And for my listeners, you get $10 off with the code WISDOM10. So uppercase wisdom, WISDOM 10, the number 10. And now let's bring on Dr. Lotte Valentin, episode 170, It's Never Too Late to Live Your Purpose. Dr. Valentin, I am so excited to talk to you. Your story is so fascinating, just the bullet points I've seen. And then just our pre-conversation, I can tell that this is just going to be inspiring to so many people, your story and your background. I want to start with your near-death experiences and how, maybe you could just briefly tell, how they impacted you, how old you were, just kind of a summation of those experiences and what came out of them.
Sure. Yes, I did have two near-death experiences, and I won't go into in depth because if I go in depth, it'll take 30 minutes. But we can briefly touch upon it. So the story is only about 5 or 10 minutes, so we have time for other conversations as well. Yeah. So my first near-death experience was after my third child was born. And I was hemorrhaging after birth, and I hemorrhaged for 3 days. I went to the ER, got sent home eventually, and landed back in the ER. And I had really large blood clots, the size of literally a baby's head. Wow. And so this was the 5th time I hemorrhaged. And luckily I was in the ER. So the first near-death experience, I knew that I was dying. So once the big blood clot came out, the doctors, I could hear everybody come into the room, and, it's like 10 people in the room, and they're tipping my table backwards. And the nurse on my right is quoting my blood pressure, and the nurse on my left is trying to place an IV because she couldn't get in, because once you go into shock, your veins collapse. Mm-hmm. And back in 1992, this was in 92, I just turned 34. And back then, they didn't place IVs. Today, when you go to the ER, they typically place an IV and they just give you saline solution. And that's because they have access to your veins. If something goes south and you start passing out, they can easily inject medication. But back then, they didn't. So she had a really hard time accessing my IV, getting the IV in. And as I'm lying on the table, I have the sensation of just falling through the sky as if you jumped out of an airplane and just free falling to the earth. And I attribute that to my blood pressure dropping. It just felt like I was falling to the ground. And when I heard the nurse on my right say, she pretty much yelled out 50/15, hurry. And that was my blood pressure. And at 60/20, you started to go below where you can support a heartbeat. So they kept tipping my table to keep the blood in my head and my vital organs. And it was shortly after the nurse yelled out 50/15 that I knew that I was dying. And this experience is very different from thinking you're going to die, because my daughter was born between a 7.4 and a 7.2 earthquake. And
San Francisco?
It was Los Angeles in southern, in Anaheim. It was, the hospital was in Anaheim, and it was the quake that was actually bigger than the Landers quake, but it was situated in the desert, and that's why we didn't have the mass destruction. But the hospital I was in was literally the last town before the desert. So that hospital really shook. We lost all the power, and my labor stopped. And that was a moment in my life, one of the moments when I thought I was going to die. And it's very different from the experience I had in the ER, because it was a knowing. I knew that I was dying, which was very different from the experience of being in that earthquake when I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. This is it. And it was shortly after that my soul just left the body, and I was hovering a couple of feet outside my body. But there was the knowing of that unconditional love and peace. But I also knew that there was no time. There was no time on the other side, and I could access any information I ever wanted. And then I got sucked back into my body. And the clairvoyant and clairaudient experiences began the next day. And I had no beliefs. I had a very materialistic worldview, and I did not believe in God or Jesus, even though I was raised in Sweden and everybody was a Lutheran. I was confirmed when I was 14. I never went to church. I didn't believe in anything the Bible said. And I just really, I know you die, it's black, you're gone. And that was my belief. So it really threw me for a loop, and I wasn't sure what had happened. And I kept thinking, maybe it's the brain that does this, or maybe it's the lack of oxygen. And I try to,
you hear all those stories. Yeah.
Right. Rationalize it. And I was afraid of telling the nurse that kept me overnight, of course, telling the nurse of what had happened, because I figured they were going to lock me up and, in a mental ward and say, well, she's crazy. She thinks she left her body. So it was really difficult. I didn't want to share it with anyone. And then I got really sick as a result of this. And I had like a suppression of the bone marrow. And it wasn't until the following spring. So my daughter was born in June. And by the following May, when my daughter was 11 months, I started having big bruises. And I bumped into the baby's changing table, something that would give you a bruise the size of maybe a nickel, gave me a bruise that spanned my entire hip. And it was just red and purple. Wow. And I was getting sick all the time. And I went to the doctor, and he said, we have to do lab work, but we didn't have insurance. We were young, and my husband had taken a new job. So we were on the 3-month wait to get insurance. So I said, no, obviously something is wrong. If I go now, they're going to know something is wrong. And it was May. And I said, we're getting insurance July 1st. And then, over time I got better. But this whole bone marrow suppression literally took 6 years. And I kept getting better, as time went on, and my bruises, after 6 months, my bruises were, just this big. And every time I put my knee on the floor to tie my kids' shoes, I would get a bruise on my knee. So any pressure on my body would create a bruise. And I always had this feeling of my soul wanting to jump out and leave the body, almost like when you lay a puzzle and the puzzle piece doesn't fit, the last one, you have to pat it to make it nice and smooth. So it was that feeling of the soul always leaving. And so 2 years after my daughter was born, when I'm fighting this, I can't stand up. I have a stool in my kitchen because I can't stand up long enough to cook dinner for my children. I have to sit down constantly because my blood pressure is so low, because I have a deficiency of blood cells, of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So I'm constantly in that I'm going to pass out mode. So it was 2 years into this. And every day I would struggle with keeping my soul in my body. I would wake up at night, take my head off the pillow, my hands and feet would be ice cold, and just feel like, okay, we can't leave. So I was always struggling to hold the soul back into my body. And 2 years later, I had another near-death experience. And it was one of those nights I'd wake up and, here we go again, take the head off the pillow, hold on to the, soul, don't leave. And that night it was just like, no, we're leaving. So that was my second near-death experience. And it was very different from the first one. And now later I joke that they saved me too quickly the first time. So the spirit world was like, okay, we have to do it again. She didn't get the message the first time. Let's have her do another one. So the second time it was very different because I just tumbled through darkness. And then I arrived at a station that I called the mid station, because it was a feeling of, if you go into a skyscraper and there is 100 floors and you push the elevator button on floor 50, and you get off at the 50th floor, that there are floors above you and that there are floors below you, even though you're not on those floors. Mm-hmm. But that was the sensation I had, that there was something above me and something below me. And I call it the bouncing station because they sent me back. So I arrived at the bouncing station. And when I got there, I heard the most beautiful music you can ever imagine. It's more beautiful than any music you've ever heard on our earth plane. It's just angelic. And I look around and I see a log cabin floating in space, and I look inside the log cabin, but there's nothing there. It's empty. So I look to my left and there is an identical log cabin to the one I saw on the right. I open it, there's nothing there. But then I become aware of this growing white light behind me. And as I turn around and see, and I'm standing in this light, and I'm just bathed in this light. But this light is the unconditional love. But there is a knowing when I was in this light that we come from this life. This is the creator, the divine source, God, whatever you want to call it. But this is, just pure bliss. And we come from that light and we return to that light. But also we carry that light within us. But in this light, there is an outline of angels, and the music is coming from the light, from the angels in the light. But I didn't believe in angels. So it's fascinating to me that this is what I'm seeing, because it wasn't that I was religious and I believed in angels. I saw things and experienced things that I didn't have a belief in. And then there were two spirit guides, and the spirit guide on my right says, "What is she doing here?" To the other spirit guide, "She has to go back. She can't be here." And I'm like, no, wait a second. How can I be here and still be me? How can I be outside my body and still be me? Because I had struggled with this now for 2 years, thinking, maybe I'm going crazy. That must have been some form of hallucination. But now here I am again. But the thing is that these experiences are more real than reality. Sure. And so here I am again, having this experience. And then the spirit guide on my diagonally to the left in front of me says, "Well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember, but you will remember this." And then it is as if I'm standing on the moon looking down on the earth, and I see this silvery, glittery fishnet around the earth. And he tells me everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that knowledge, I get sent back. And so this is now 1994. So it literally took me a quarter of a century to really start putting everything together and really start to understand how interconnected we all are and how divine our existence really is. And so now that has led me to ancestral healing. So we're going to talk about
yes, for sure. Well, that's really fascinating. I mean, the more that I learned about like the esoteric and healing and the other side of the veil and any kind of energy frequency, it's always about patterns, sacred geometry. And like you said, the grids, It's fascinating that you were shown that and how we're all connected in this web of the same kind of energy field or whatever. But before we get into ancestral healing, what do you think was the most important thing, or maybe the top two things that you really internalized from those near-death experiences? Was it that we're all connected? Was that a big
I think that, the most important thing is that life is eternal, because when we die, we're still there. It's just our physical body. It is as if you drive a car for 20 years, and then the car dies and you get out of the car, you get into another car, you buy a new one, right? That car died. So the body died, just like you get rid of the car, but you're still there, right? Your soul is still there. And so I think that is the most important lesson, is that we have eternal life. And I did not believe that prior to my near-death experiences. And then the interconnectedness and how divine our existence really is, and how every single soul has a purpose on earth. And there are many times when I work with people are struggling to, figure out, what is my purpose? Why am I here? But I always remind them, it's a life journey.
Yeah. You're here to live.
Yeah. It's your life journey. You might never exactly know why, because you're here to have that experience. If you knew everything, it wouldn't be an experience. So you have to just, follow your gut intuition and listen to that gut.
So this moved you into, so I think it's fascinating. I don't know what came first, but you you got the inkling to go to med school at the age of 54. And I was telling you earlier, I'm 53 now, and that's like me going to med school next year. That just blows my mind. At the same time, I told you I went to get my PhD, and that's just something on the back burner. So I'm very inspired by people who do these things, quote unquote, later in life. But I feel like 50s are the new 30s, something, whatever that means, just in terms of longevity. And I don't know, things are speeding up really fast on the earth right now. So we need a lot of people in these capacities. I think the wisdom that once you hit 50 or even 40s now, it's like there's this wisdom that the world needs from you. And so when you go into a service capacity, that can be really powerful. And before that was the age of retirement, right? Now we're just getting started. But you actually wrote a book called Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul. What was that all about? Yeah,
so I wrote a book. So let me just back up a little bit, because it was in 2004 that the spirit world told me I had to write a book. And it was 12 years after my near-death experiences, I became more and more clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, and started seeing things before they happened and hearing things. And after 12 years of this, it was just the spirit world drops in. I'm like, okay, what? You got my attention, because it had been, some people, they learn these things very quickly, but had such a very materialistic and scientific worldview of how things exist and how we exist in the world, that it really took me a long time to really understand, how clairvoyant and clairaudient and clairsentient we all are. We are all intuitive creatures, but you just have to tune into that. And for me, it was just a learning curve over 12 years of showing me and telling me, you're going to be in an accident, or watch out for this truck, and, seeing my kids in danger at a distance. And it was just this constant, evolution of my own abilities. And after 12 years, I was on the computer and I said, okay, it's been 12 years. My kids are teenagers. I should go back to the workforce. And when I was young, I was a business and computer science major. I was a computer programmer and systems analyst for IBM. So
wow. That's quite a jump. Very left brain,
right? Extremely dominant, right? Left brain. So these experiences really turned on my right brain. So it became a balance between them more. And the spirit world dropped in. I was on the computer and I saw this degree, and it said naturopathic doctor. And I said, oh my gosh, it's a medical school. I can't go to med school. I'm already in my 40s. I'm way too old for this. And I'm just going to look tomorrow. I'll find something else. But I was always drawn to healing, because I was born a healer. My father was a general practitioner, an MD. My mom was a hospital floor administrator. One of my brothers is a surgeon. My cousins are doctors or dentists. So I grew up in an environment of medicine, and I was always drawn. I was always wanting to help other people heal. And so, of course, naturally, I'm drawn to this now, especially after my near-death experiences. And I said, okay, forget it. I'm just going to go to the kitchen. I'll look again tomorrow. And on my way to the kitchen, I become aware of a spirit guide, talking to me telepathically. And he says, no, you have to go to medical school and become a naturopathic doctor. And you're to combine East and West, which I took to mean kind of old and new, which is really what naturopathic medicine is, because you learn acupuncture and homeopathy, but you also learn pharmaceuticals and general medicine. And you have to write a book. And I'm looking to see if I can see the spirit guide. I'm like, what do you mean write a book? I can't write a book. What am I supposed to write about? And he said, when the time is right, we will tell you. For now, you just go and get your pre-med classes and go to medical school. And you're to bring messages and healing to the people. And I'm like, what do you mean bring messages to the people? I don't even understand. And again, it's that message just, came back over and over again, just focus on getting your degree. So I was enrolled in the pre-med classes within a week or two at the local community college. So I took the, biology, the chemistry, the organic chemistry, the physics, the math, the whole thing.
Wow, you really acted. You did it. You went straight to it.
I had nothing because I was a business and computer science major, and I grew up in Sweden in Northern Europe. So, and in high school we major, and I was a business and language major. So I hadn't had any science classes since 9th grade. Yeah. So I had to take the high school advanced biology and then high school chemistry before I could even get into the college classes. So I really had to start from the beginning. But everything is possible. So then I got to med school. So after I finished all my prereqs, I went to med school in 2012. And when I got there, I'm just telling the spirit world, I'm here. Now what? For 4 years, all they do is tell me, finish your degree, focus on graduating, focus on passing all your classes. And I kept saying, what is it? What is the book? What do you mean messages? And they're just constantly would tell me, when the time is right, we will let you know. We'll tell you. And that is kind of what my life has been like. And it's just, I've been guided in, each step on the way. So as soon as I graduated, right away, they, literally my last month in school, they gave me the title and they said, the title of your book is called Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul. And I said, okay. And the book isn't about going to medical school. It's a book about healing and transformation. It is my journey. It has my near-death experiences in it. It has messages at the end of each chapter, and short exercises that just to help people incorporate it into their own life so that they can become who they were truly born to be. And so it's to awaken people's intuitive abilities by taking them on a journey through my own life. So you have to read it from the beginning to the end, because you're not going to be the same person.
Just to see that development of how those things came. Yeah. Yeah.
And it ends with, the divine feminine and being creative and all that. But the title that the spirit world gave me for the book, Med School After Menopause, they said it has to be titled that because it's to inspire other women to know that just because they hit, midlife and they might be perimenopausal or menopausal, that's not the end of life, because our world is different now and we need these women to be creative, and we're trying to bring in the divine feminine and heal the world. And by each person following their own path and listening to their own intuition and doing what they came here to do. And that is that true gut feeling. That is that true intuition. But we tend to reason. Our brain tends to say, oh no, that's not practical. Just like I did. I can't go to med school. I'm too old for this. But once I got the message from the spirit world, I understood. But that was a message for me. That's not to say that everybody who's listening to this podcast needs to wait for a message from the spirit world, because you already know in your heart and in your gut. Trust that feeling, trust that knowledge that you carry, and don't listen to that brain that tries to reason things and be practical.
Yeah.
Because that true feeling of who you truly are is in your heart.
I'm curious about how the divine feminine came through for you and how that became part of your culmination into like claiming your gifts and just moving forward in your knowing, really, in your wisdom. Because we talk a lot about the divine feminine on this podcast, the sacred feminine. And how did that show up for you? What was that about?
I think over time, because it's the divine feminine that is lacking in the world today, because we've created a world that's built on competition and power and greed. Even our medicine, Western medicine, is very much built on greed and corporations, pharmaceutical industry controlling pretty much what we learn and how to treat conditions. So the only way, so for me, it's that the divine guidance of bringing that, helping women step up to the plate and really take on what they incarnated for in this life, because we are living in a very transformative period where, I don't know if you know the old shamanic saying of the condor of the south and the eagle of the north fly together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and so it's a combination of mind and heart and bringing it together, but it's really the divine feminine. Now, men also have a divine feminine side, but what I see when I work with people spiritually, either as a medium or psychic or medical intuitive or ancestral healer, is that I would say 95 to 98% of my clients are women. And it's the women that are stepping up and creating healing, for themselves, for their families, for their ancestors. And it is all, the way I see it is a movement of women across the earth that are here to help change the way we live and our life and business on earth, right? It's all interconnected, and it's that divine feminine within each of us, but it begins with each of us listening to our own intuition, our own heart, our own gut feeling, and following through on that and not letting the brain get in the way.
Yeah, I love that. There's an immediacy to the feminine. Like you said, there's the feminine energy in men, the aspect of the divine feminine in men as well. So it's not gender specific, but it is women. I just kind of have in my mind's eye, I don't know how it worked on the other side before we were born, but and if you espouse to, there's multiple realities and multiple worlds and dimensions, and we could have lived many, many lifetimes, et cetera, that I heard a spiritual teacher recently say, like, the reason there's 7 billion people on the planet is everyone wants to be here during this transformative time. All the souls in the cosmos are like, I want to be on earth right now. Send me. And, we signed up for this uprising of the feminine, this evolutionary time period where people, are awakening to the lifetimes of suppression, to this feminine, the sacred feminine, and this collaboration, like we were talking about the Native American prophecies or whatever, how, everything has culminated to this point where now we have to go together. The masculine and the feminine are now, rising together. And, lots and lots of women. You go to trainings, you go to retreats, there's more men coming in, there's more men awakening, but it's largely been female driven because, it's our time and we know it. And I love that we're finally as a collective moving into this place where aging and, it doesn't have the same stigma. At least I'm starting to see that more and more. Maybe it's because I'm getting older, but I'm also seeing that, like I said earlier, we're just getting started. When you're in midlife, you're just getting going. You can take all of your lived experience and everything that you've passed through and now gift the knowledge and wisdom that you've gleaned from those experiences to the world, to your sphere of influence. And that's powerful.
Yeah. I mean, you were talking about you're 53 and thinking of getting your PhD. And the way I look at it is when you're hit 50, you've only lived 30 years of your adult life. So assuming that we're going to be 100 and another 30 years is only taking you to 80. Yeah. And a lot, if you're healthy, a lot of people are working to 75 or 80 now, because I mean, how many years can you play golf or knit in a rocking chair?
One of my heroines, her name is Anne Baring. She's 90, sharp as a tack. She's written Dream of the Cosmos and Myth of the Goddess and all these amazing books. But she said since her 20s, I mean, she just turned 90 this year, and she's on lots of different appearances and different, she's going to be on my podcast. I'm holding out for that. But she said since her 20s, so 70 years ago, she's been waiting for this day. She's been waiting for this time. She was like, I'm not going to live to see how everything obviously plays out. But she said, it's speeding up so fast. And she goes, I don't mince words anymore, but I just look at her, people like her, and I'm like, she's 90 and I'm complaining because I'm like 50 something. So I'm not really complaining, but what I'm saying is by the time I'm 90, I can't imagine the transformative, evolutionary periods that we'll have passed through as a collective. It's exciting.
It really is. And, just being in your 50s, a lot of degrees. And going to med school, I had to do the prereq. So that took a couple of years, and then med school, which is 4 years, and then another 2 years of residency. So that is, quite a long haul, but a lot of degrees are a lot shorter, like 2 to 4 years.
Yeah. And my PhD would only, I think, take me 2.5 years.
It's nothing. I mean, think of that's really nothing. If you're going to live another 30 years, now you're going to be working with something that you're truly passionate about and that the world really needs, because that's why you were guided to go down that path.
Okay, well, let's jump into ancestral healing in our remaining time, because that's something that you were shown. Or maybe it was an outgrowth of what you were shown. Maybe you didn't have the awareness, or did you during the second near-death experience when you were shown by the spirit guide the patterns? Did you have a knowing at that time it was ancestral stuff, or no?
No, I really didn't. It wasn't until, because my focus first after my near-death experiences were the first 12 years, I was just shown events that were going to happen. I would tell my kids or my husband, write it down in the book. So I would know that it wasn't a deja vu. And I really did know something about the future. So that took 12 years, then the prereqs, and then go to med school. As soon as I graduated from med school in 2016, I didn't even have my license yet. I had just taken the boards, and I met this woman I was taking classes in craniosacral therapy because I didn't have my license yet. And I was like, well, let me take some more classes, pick up some more things to do. And she said, I'm a medium. And she had studied at Arthur Findlay College in England. And I didn't know anything about her. And she said, I have your mother with me. Are you open to receive messages? And even though I had gone to medical school based on spiritual guidance, and I still was doubtful that she could tell me anything, that you could actually, talking to your own spirit guides is one thing, but to bring in a spirit for somebody else is a whole different thing. Right. Yeah. And I kind of, leaned back and I said, sure, I'm open for messages, thinking she's never going to be able to know anything about me. I was raised in Europe. My life is so different. Sure enough, it was very clear she had my mother with her. And they kept telling me I had to go to Arthur Findlay College to study mediumship. And I kept telling her, I can't, I just graduated. I'm going into a residency.
The spirit realm really wants you to go to school.
Right? I'm like, wow. I can't do that. And after the third time, because there was so many things that came through, and it was very clear that she had very detailed information about my life that she could not know. So after the third time, I said, okay, fine. I will go to Arthur Findlay College and take a class in mediumship. And I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but it's going to happen. Sure enough, 6 months later, I'm at Arthur Findlay College in England, taking classes in mediumship. And then that is how, my mediumship develops. And then, of course, many trips back to England and study with teachers at this college, which are just phenomenal because they have devoted their life to mediumship. And that's all they do typically is many times they a big portion of their life. Some of them have regular jobs because they do have to pay bills, and rent and all that. But they really have devoted their life to mediumship. And so I studied with them for a couple of years, going back and forth. And it was very clear that it wasn't until I was there when I learned that they said, oh, we are bringing messages to our clients, to the people that, come for a reading or a sitting. And it wasn't until I heard that term that all of a sudden I understood what the spirit world meant in 2004. And now it's 2017, 2018. So that many years later, all of a sudden it clicked. Messages, to bring messages and healing to the people. Now I understood what that meant, right? And then of course I go there, and then I have a reading with my teacher, and she said, oh, you're writing a book. Nobody knew I was writing a book. All I had was an outline. I had the titles of the chapters. I pretty much knew what I was going to, say in each chapter, but I hadn't really started writing. And she said, oh, your mother is telling me you're writing a book. And then she said, oh, your mom is telling me you're to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And that is the exact message I received in 2004, because the spirit world said you're to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And I've gotten that message 4 times from.
Wait, so how many books have you written right now?
I've written 1. It was published 2 years ago. And so, my second book is already brewing. But, and my book also, the one I wrote, the Med School After Menopause, it won an award 6 months ago. I won an award from Living Now Book Awards as the first place in spiritual leadership category.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm really
I want to read it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you were also on the Shift Network on their Ancestral Healing Summit. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the ancestral piece, because your mother comes through, and obviously you can probably see that she's part of this mission on the other side, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't until I became a medium. And so now I'm working as a medium, and I started having readings probably like 2 years ago, I think it was. I had several readings in a row where I saw the pattern of abuse within families. And I said, well, I have your grandmother here. She was abused by your grandfather. I see your mother, it was 3 kids, and then she was abused. And then, now you're born, and it's your mom married the same person as your grandfather. He was also abusive. And I kept seeing that pattern. I had several clients in a row and I started thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going crazy. Why am I seeing the same pattern with the next client? That was my last client. But it was like the spirit was showing me or giving me these clients so that I could see that there's a pattern to it. And then that brought me to ancestral healing and actually studying ancestral healing with other physicians, or, family constellation therapy, counseling with other physicians and counselors like around the world. And it was during the pandemic, so everything was online. And I had wanted to take this class many times, but there was always something in my schedule that prevented me. And now, because of the pandemic, it was offered online. And so I went through that whole training, and then everything started to click, because I could see that it was an integration of the counseling that you learn going through medical school, and we have to learn to diagnose according to the DSM-5 and be able to send them along to a psychiatrist for evaluation, all that. So you do get a lot of counseling classes in med school, but then I also actually studied ancestral healing counseling. And so you have a lot of tools from that, how to see the patterns within families and where it's coming from. But then that got combined with my mediumship skills, because that's how it all started. I would see it, because the spirit world would say, oh, here's the grandmother, here's the grandfather, show me how that family lineage, had that trauma that was passed down. So it was, and now, it's become, med school, ancestral healing, mediumship, and my training in shamanic studies. So it's become an integration of all of it. And that's what led me, I think, to be invited to the Shift Network to speak at their Ancestral Healing Summit.
So what have you found? We've done a couple episodes on this podcast on ancestral healing, and I know everyone kind of has a different take on it. What do you think is at the heart of it, in terms of, like, let's say you have this awareness, and sometimes we don't have the awareness of what we're carrying epigenetically or whatever. Well, let's just say you do have the knowing of some of the, like in my family of origin, lots of bipolar, lots of suicidality, lots of addiction on both sides. and I have a sister who took her life and an aunt who took her life. And so that's just in my immediate focus, because I'm like, this has to go back so far. So we actually climbed into, healing our ancestral lines. My sister completed suicide in 2005. My remaining sisters and mother and we really climbed into, how do we break these patterns so this doesn't continue? And so we were just like, as we started working with healers, it was multiple generations. This has been going on in our family lines way, way, way before you would have even put a label to something like depression, bipolar, anxiety, or whatever. Just the crazy factor, that word crazy, was something that was literally passed down and passed down and passed, but lots of gifts too, high gifts. So for your, when you speak about this to groups and you really climb into it, like the heart of it, what do you think shifts these ancestral patterns the most profoundly? Is there, I'm sure there's not just one thing, but what's at the heart of it, I guess, is what I'm asking as you see it.
So when I work with people, so many times people sign up for a medical intuitive, which then turns into an ancestral healing session, or vice versa, right? So, but many times people struggle. It could be a physical problem. It could be an emotional problem. But once you start having a conversation with that person, you start seeing the patterns and you can see where it's coming from. But once you understand why you're struggling with a problem, whether it's physical or emotional or spiritual, that is when you can create healing for it, because it's that aha moment of, oh my gosh, now I understand why I struggle with this. It's coming from, my mom, or it's coming from my dad or my aunt, or
it didn't start with me. I'm not. And that can actually be very liberating for people, that this is a bigger problem than you. You just happen to be carrying it. It's not who you are. You're just carrying it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's exactly, I studied with Mark Boleyn. It didn't start with you. That's his famous book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it is a great, ground floor. It really lays out the beginnings of ancestral healing. It goes so much deeper than his book, but it's a great way to open up those pathways in your brain so that you start understanding where it's coming from, because you can see how it is the actions and the reactions and the interactions of your ancestors, that they then change their epigenetics and their DNA, and they get passed down through the generations. So they've done, there is one study, the very famous mouse study. Has anybody spoken about the mouse study?
I'm not sure.
It is a famous study that it was called ancestral odor fear conditioning. And it was published in the Nature Neuroscience, I think it was, back in 2013. It was a study that was led by Brian Diaz at the Emory University, Emory School of Medicine, back in 2013. And what they did is they took male mice and they exposed them to cherry blossom smell.
Oh, the cherry blossom study. I love this. Yes.
And then they give them an electric shock. And so now they feared the cherry blossom smell. Then they took the sperm from that mice, artificially inseminated the female mice. And then their offspring, those little pups, feared the cherry blossom smell just based on the sperm that was passed
Even though they didn't have that direct experience, it was epigenetically encoded. Yeah.
So when you think about all of our ancestors, pretty much have been in wars. So if you think, okay, grandpa was in a war, every time he heard the siren go off, he thought, he took cover, that the airplanes are coming in, they're going to drop the bombs, and this is the day I'm going to die. And so he flips his epigenetic markers because of his reaction to that terror and that fear. And then he survives the war. He has kids. And then those children have children. So now the granddaughter is born. The granddaughter has panic attacks every time she hears the siren. But she has never had any traumatic experiences about sirens. She's, nobody works in the police or fire department, anything like that. And then you trace it back to, it comes from the grandfather. It's the grandfather's fear of sirens that is passed down to the granddaughter. So see how it's it can show up like that. And
it could be, 3 or 4 generations removed.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And so you have no idea why am I having, or why is my child experiencing these fears? But it could be that it's just passed down from earlier generations. So there are different ways of looking at where things are coming from and why it's showing back up in your life.
So fascinating. I think that's part of the interconnectedness, isn't it? Like
I look at it that way. Yes.
Yeah. Like how things manifest, that connects you to your family lines, which connects you to the greater. I mean, it didn't start with an ancestor either, right? These human conditions we face, these issues, we're all in it together. We're all, as we clear it, we're not just clearing it for ourselves and our ancestral lines, we're clearing it for the collective. And we're sort of all moving together as one organism, really.
Yes.
That's how I kind of view the interconnectivity. Okay, so when you were having, I just have to ask you this, when you were having your near-death experience and you saw you call it like a silver web over the earth, what were they trying to say about the Earth's mission with the greater cosmic plan, the connectivity to that? What was your understanding of that?
Well, all they told me was that the message for me was that we are all connected. Everything is connected on Earth, like all the humans, the plants, the animals, we're all interconnected. So we are all one. Right. So it's so
mind blowing to try to I've heard this so many times and I'm like, it's just really, your logic brain does not know how to place that.
Yeah, we are all affected by each other. And I talk about it in my book too, how our heart has electrical impulses, right? We measure it with an EKG, but our heart resonates and entrains with other organisms. So, if you go into a room and somebody's mad, you feel it. And then now you're syncing up with that person. And now you're mad too, because they're mad. Or if somebody has loving feelings for you, you're like, oh, I feel so good. This person is sending me love. And that is how we sync up with things. But we sync up with everything. We sync up with animals, we sync up with plants, and we sync up with things, whether it has a heart or not. So that again just shows you, just even our heart, how it syncs up. Forget all the energetic ties and strings and ancestors and all that. I mean, just our human being, we are already connected with everything, right? Just by our physical body. But then we are also connected through the trauma that we inherit on our DNA. That comes down. So we inherit the trauma of the grandfather who lived in the war. And that's on our genes. And then if we also have traumatic experiences in our own childhood, and that, helps flip all those genes. So it's our own reactions to our own circumstances and our own actions and interactions with other people that then is going to flip our own gene markers and create an experience. So when you go, if I drop you off in the jungle in front of a lion, you're not going to sit there and say, I'm going to dilate my pupils. I'm going to increase my heart rate so that I can run. Right? It's like you're just going to do it. Yeah, and it's the same with all of these things. It just happens. It's automatic. We don't even notice it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of we are being breathed. If you're still here and you're still breathing, there's something supporting you. There's something higher keeping you alive, beating your heart, all those autonomic nervous functions and stuff. But gosh, okay. So when we talk about, because I want to wrap this up in a way that feels like, oh, I could just keep talking to you forever. So I'm just trying to figure out how to bring this back. So let's just say this. So I want to ask you, there is something I forgot to ask you. I am a nerd for reading near-death experience books. So that's why I want to read yours. But my kids laugh at me because I've read all of them. I think every one that I've ever found out about, I read. So one thing that I noticed as a very universal, aspect to somebody who dies, crosses over and comes back, is that somehow they get this very clear knowing or message. Maybe it's an overt message they hear from a guide or deity, or they just know that it's just about love, that the whole entire matrix the web, the net, the purpose of life, etc. It's all just about love. Did that come to you at all?
Yes. I think that's a universal message that NDEers typically get, because it's all based on love. Our whole universe, it's that, because the light is unconditional love, and we're part of it. We carry it within us, and it's having that unconditional love for other people. But that's also a very difficult thing, to always do the right thing when we're human, because our ego gets in the way. We feel hurt by, the actions of somebody else. And then to still have that unconditional love is hard. But that's really what it's all about. It's to create that unconditional love for everybody.
Mm. Yeah. And I think the big lie is that we've bought into as a collective is that we're separate from that love. And it's created all this warring and, all this toxic masculinity and the patriarchy. And it's all been about power over instead of with and collaboration. Yeah. And it's kind of circling back to what we were talking about earlier with the divine feminine, is we're now moving into this era where people are awakening to the fact that we are one with this divine feminine force that has been not talked about, not acknowledged, sort of put in the background, and it's her time now. Yeah. It's her time. Yeah. It's so funny. You know what? Yeah. It's so coincidental, but I just found this card that it's actually one of my cards that I made, my soul declaration cards, but I just looked at it and it says, I am one with the divine feminine. So that was beautiful. Sitting here looking at me while we were talking the whole time. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. This was really great. How can people find your book? And then where's the best place to follow you online? Or to find you online?
Right. My book is on Amazon and many other online book platforms across the world. It is available as a print regular book, Kindle, and audiobook. And so it's available on different audio book platforms as well as Amazon. And the best way to find me is to go to Dr. Lotte, DRLOTTE.com, drlotte.com. And has more of my medical information, working as a physician, but it's connected. So it says, if you want to work with Dr. Lotte spiritually, click here. And then
I'm totally going to book a session with you.
That takes you to
after talking to you, I'm like, because I love how you have the science and the esoteric. So you have all these disciplines that you've studied. Mm-hmm. But what strikes me as we've been talking, just kind of looking into your eyes here and getting a feel for what you're about, like you have a really balanced approach to helping the body and the mind and the soul heal. Mm-hmm. It's like you were led to these places to study, but you're still grounded in the most important aspect, which is love, and that, and the force of that and how that heals. And so, I'm intrigued. Mediumship is so multifaceted. You talk about being these things like clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, all of those. Mm-hmm. And like you said, everyone has those capacities. So I just honor you for stepping into these roles and publicly speaking about your own lived experience around this and how it came forward for you. But I also get the clear sense that you're trying to empower others with that same thing. I don't get any ego from you is what I'm saying, which is kind of rare.
That's what my teachers at Arthur Findlay College also tell me. When they work with me, they're like, wow, you've resolved your ego. You don't have an ego. I say it's unusual, but it's I would attribute that to my near-death experience. I know what I'm here to do. I know I'm here to help inspire other women to step into their power, to help them find their own divine feminine, and to help heal them and heal the world. Because by each person that I can help heal will create healing for them. But everybody that they come in contact with, because we are all connected. So by me helping heal them, they will heal others. Just by being healed themselves, because there's a shift that is created within them. Right. And so it's like, for me, it's like every person I can help heal, I'm helping create healing for the world. So
beautiful. Wow. Well, thank you for showing up and saying yes and not dying all those years ago.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And just everyone go to her website and thank you. Thank you for today. This was very inspiring for me personally.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
So just remember, it is never, 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 ever too late to step into your path and purpose. I mean, we're always on a path, right? We're always living our purpose to some degree because we're here and we're learning. We have a body, but you have this divine essence. You have this divine potential. And no matter how old or young you are, you get to connect to that inner light to receive your own healing and guidance. And then as you actuate that potential, you then do that for others. So I always just say, tap into your desire, whatever lives in you that wants to be expressed. That's actually why I started this podcast, because I wanted people to express who they truly are. You probably hear me say that line with the onset of almost every episode, because I truly believe that we are here to manifest our desires and be who we really are, who we actually are, who our soul longs to be. Check out Dr. Lotte at divinespiritualessence.com. Follow me on Instagram, cherie.burton. And remember, we're all connected anyway, right? At the soul level, to each other, to the earth, to the plants and animals and elements and cosmos and multiverse and everything. We are all connected to the all. And with that thought, have a glorious week. And we'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.